I wanted to also talk about limiters a little bit because I didn't get a chance to do that yet, and I wanted to make that more clear because the difference between a compressor, an expander, and a limiter is what it does to the dynamic range. So your compressor decreases your dynamic range, and expander expands your dynamic range or increases your dynamic range, and a limiter actually limits your dynamic range. So what does that mean? So a limiter is going to basically pick a spot. You're going to pick a spot where you're saying, I don't want dynamics, I don't want anything to go over this certain point. You create like a phantom point that just stops. So if you look at these guitar tracks, they've actually already been limited. And so they end up looking like just a block of sound, as you can see here. And I want to show you how you can use a limiter. I'm going to use a different sound that's not already limited, like, for example, this lead. I'm going to show you how you can use a limiter to create density as well. So we talked about creating density with saturation earlier. And you could certainly do that on this lead that we're about to work on. But I'm going to show you a cleaner way. So this is no saturation, but still creating weight using limiters. And the reason why this is important, especially with guitars, is because this is the way that you can make a guitar more audible in a mix without making it louder. I'm going to show you how to do that. So this is what it sounds like with no limiting. All right, so now if you're watching the screen, you're seeing the levels going up and down. Certain notes are louder than others. So the low notes actually, we can identify it as the low notes are louder than the high notes. But we want all the notes to be an equal amount of volume. So what you can do is you grab this link tool here. I'm using this plugin called L1 from Waves. If you grab the link tool and pull it down, it acts like a limiter. It limits the dynamic range. So if I was to put it like here, the volume would never go over -22. So now my low notes and my high notes are the same volume now, whereas before, now you might notice the volume is getting quieter. Well, that's because we used the link tool, which brings down also the output. It's a good habit to get into when you're using a limiter is to link those two together and pull them up, pull them down together so that you're setting your limiter threshold to the signal without hearing, because like if I just use the threshold only, notice how the signal gets louder. So that makes it harder to know where your adjustment's going to end up. But let me show you how this can create more weight. So I'm going to leave the limiter off. I'm just going to hit play, and I'm going to set the volume so that we can hear it.
Well, I can't help that it's not worth it. You had your chance and you missed out. You couldn't change me.
All right, so we can hear the lead now. But the thing is that it kind of sort of pokes out at different points, and it's not really, you can't really make out every single note. So if I was to bring my limiter down to start limiting the louder notes and bring those down to the quieter notes.
Well, I can't help that it's not worth it. You had your chance and you missed out.
And then I can bring up my output, and that brings that weight up so you can hear.
Well, I can't help that it's not worth it. You had your chance and you missed out. You couldn't change me, so don't mistake me. I'm not someone who will back down.
All right, so watch this. Watch the volume of this.
Well, I can't help that it's not worth it. You had your chance and you missed out. You couldn't change me, so don't mistake me. I'm not someone who will.
So you notice at a certain point, yeah, I mean, it got louder as I was lowering the threshold. But at a certain point, it stopped getting louder, but you could still hear it getting louder. So by effectively limiting the signal to a certain point, you can create weight, especially with this limiter in particular. You can make the signal, the sound, take up more space, within your mix. Now, in guitars in particular, I use limiters all the time. I think that compressors are too slow for guitars, and it kind of makes the guitar sound weird. So I like to use limiters because they react so fast that it allows you to even out all of your signals. And guitars are really dynamic instruments. I mean, they play all kinds of different notes, and as the notes go up, they get quieter. And so it's a good way of balancing out the guitar, especially when you're dealing with leads that kind of play like high and low notes together.
I can't help that it's not worth it. You had your chance and you
So like if a limiter, if you didn't have a limiter as a tool, that part would be so hard to fix. Like it would take so much volume automation to make that sound. So limiter is a really cool tool for doing that and for managing your dynamics. Do we have any final questions on dynamics? Wait, he has one.
What is your thought between like the L1 and opposed to like using like the L2 or the L3? Like just different chain. What's your preferences or why?
As far as my preferences go, I like L1 a lot. I use it pretty much that's pretty much like the only limiter that I use on drums, on guitars. However, there's like the LA2A, which is kind of a weird. It's like a limiter, but it's a compressor. That's good on like vocals or drums, and then you've got your L2s, which are known to destroy snare hits. Like I can put an L2 on this drum track and the snare will die. But sometimes that's an interesting tool. So like, it's not going to work for us. That's okay. But like, for example, if you want to turn a snare down on an overhead track, you can use an L2. And I do that all the time because it depends on how you mic it. But if you mic it in a certain way to where the drummer's playing a drum beat and the snare like literally jumps 12 dB over the cymbal hits, you can chop that off using the L2, which allows you to take that signal and then compress the cymbals without having the compressor react to the snare hits. Yeah, so that's a really good trick for anyone who's dealing with their snare sounds really hot in the overheads. Use a limiter to cut those off and make the compressor react to the signal better. I don't have a demonstration for that, but just try it. I mean, I swear it's magic.
Great. Yeah, we've got a couple online here if you'd like to take some.
Sure.
Nathan Danger Prince asked, if you're using a limiter on vocals, you bring up a lot of background noise like click from headphones. Would that be something that you would have to address early on in the recording stage, or can you salvage it?
Right, so I would address that at the recording stage as much as possible and try to tell the vocalist, like, hey, there's a certain point where we're not going to be able to get these headphones any louder because they're going to come through on the microphone. Now, if you actually listen to this bridge section, you can hear the headphone bleed.
You can't take away part of me, my dreams.
I don't know if you guys can hear that in the background there.
You can't.
You hear that guitar like right at the beginning?
You can't.
It's very barely in there. One way you could salvage wait, let me see if the headphone bleed gets worse over here.
But you're not what I made up, a figment of a dream. You said.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty, I took care of it pretty well on this, because I recorded this, so, I tried to make sure. Let me see if one of these sections at the end might have worse headphone bleed.
A figment of a dream. You're not what I made up. You said you'd bring it to me.
Yeah, there's not much in there. But you can use like a transient processor, for example, to get rid of headphone bleed, and I'll show you how to do that. So I have this plugin that we just put out like a week ago. It's called Transify. This is a multi-band transient processor, so you have control of your attack and your sustain of 4 different bands of frequency ranges. So you can go in, for example, and take sustain out from your low mids. So I'll show you what that would sound like.
You can't take away part of me, my dreams, your
You hear that headphone bleed coming through now?
voice, meaning
So I can just turn this down.
voice, meaningless. I'm what
Now the headphone bleed is gone.
you
At
can't.
least some of it is.
You can't take away part of me, my dreams, your voice, meaningless. I'm what you'll never be, but you're not what.
So if you have access to some kind of like transient processor, mess around with the sustain knob, and you can kind of change that background noise and kind of eliminate some of the headphone bleed. But I think the best way is to try and do it at the source. Get the vocalist comfortable to where it's loud enough to where they can perform the part, but it's not too loud to where you can't capture it.
Awesome. This is also from Nathan Danger Prince. When using limiters, do you have to be careful not to zap the life out of the performance? And will that make a difference during the mastering stage?
So the way that I use limiters is sort of, it's a mixing tool in terms of if I want to create weight, or a more layman way of saying that is create volume. Basically, you do have a compromise. You have this performance, but sometimes a perfect performance, maybe it's extremely dynamic, doesn't allow you to get it loud enough in the mix when it's combined with other elements, because it has been, if you're trying to keep the original performance intact all the way to complete authenticity, you might not be able to work with that in a mixing scenario. So you might have to compromise some of the performance by limiting it to create the weight that it needs to be able to be audible with the other elements. And I think it is always a balancing act. You're always going to be deciding how far is too far and how much is too little, and it really just comes down to experimentation. I'm just trying to show you that I think there's a lot of people that don't understand what limiters, expanders, and compressors do, and they just will use them because someone told them to do it, or they've heard that, oh yeah, you use compressor on drums, and oh, you're supposed to have a compressor on a snare drum. I mean, I've gotten tons of snare sounds where there wasn't a compressor used at all, and I instead was using a transient processor, or maybe I was using an expander. Maybe I had a snare sample that had too much body, and I could use an expander to create more attack and less body. So just know what the tools do so that they can help you accomplish your goals, and also have a better understanding of what audio is, knowing that a snare sound is made up of a transient and a body. You can then open your mind to interacting with those two parts of the signal to create the sound that you're going for. And I would say, some of the demonstrations I've done here, I've shown you like very extreme cases of how you can take a limiter and you completely cut off like 12 dB of a sound. But that's not necessarily what you would do in an actual mix. I just am trying to demonstrate like what the tool actually does and how it reacts to sound. So you might find yourself using a limiter as a corrective form of a tool, where you're taking like an acoustic guitar performance that has someone playing and it's very sharp and there's lots of attack, and some chords have peaks that stick out over top of like a nice gentle performance. You might use a limiter in that case where you completely cut those peaks off and make it more pleasant to listen to. Whereas I might use a limiter on my guitar track so that I can squeeze every ounce of volume of the guitar performance as possible, so I can turn it up and have a ton of weight in my mix. So yeah, experimentation and just utilizing the tools for what they're made to do.